We're live. That's brilliant. Richie, how are we, first of all, in what are these difficult times? How are we, and how are we keeping?
Yeah, very well, Niall. I think it's going into week 4 of being on lockdown, and I think, like most people, we've started to get a bit of structure and a bit of normality back to our lives. I think the strangest thing is not being involved on a sort of day-to-day basis with rugby, but again, what it's allowed us to do is to give us more time to be reflective on the season that's just gone, to review what went well, what didn't go as well as we'd hoped, but more importantly, it's given us another month or 6 weeks to plan ahead to next season. So yeah, again, it's being able to adapt to these situations, and I think what I've managed to do the last couple of weeks, probably not too dissimilar to yourself, is probably widen my network base and have conversations that I probably would have liked to have had during the season, but never really had enough time to do that. So, looking at it quite philosophically, I think there's conversations that I've had with other coaches, in this country and different countries. People are sharing more ideas now around how they coach, the different processes that they're using, and again, it's been a really good sort of professional development opportunity for me. So yeah, disappointed on one hand that the season had to be cut short, because I think that 10th place finish for us, I'm fully confident that we would have finished a lot higher than that with 5 games left to go in the season. But I'm sure that all the other coaches will be saying that in National 1 as well. Yeah,
maybe James Shanahan will be thinking he could have gone up. But there we are. All those, I think we've got to reflect at this time of the health of everybody, and I think that's your first paramount thought as well, isn't it? It's the health of the wider population and the health of the members and supporters of the club that come down and cheer the players on every week.
Absolutely right, and rugby and sport is just a tiny part in everything else. You just referenced there the health and well-being of everybody, not just involved with Cambridge Rugby Club, and I'm sure we all know of people that are struggling with their health at the moment. So our thoughts do go out to those people. But in terms of us as a rugby club, I think what it's also shown the last 4 or 5 weeks is how close a community Cambridge Rugby is. And that's not just my involvement with the senior team, but that collective spirit from the supporters, through the wider club. I think that's been really prevalent over the last couple of weeks, and probably shows us how lucky we are as a rugby club. I don't think everybody can say in National 1 that there's been this amount of support, at these difficult times. But Cambridge, again, everybody has mucked together, and again, I think that'll put us in good stead when we do eventually come back.
So you talk about reflecting on the season. How have you reflected on the season? Give it a score out of 10, first of all, if you can.
I'd probably say 6.5 or 7, and that's based around the progression from where we were 2 seasons ago. If you go back to the game against Sale, that last game that we had to win 2 years ago to stay up in National 1, to probably some of our performances this season, I think there's been a huge amount of growth, a huge amount of development within this group. But a lot of that has come with the cohesion of the squad that we've got, and again, it was always going to take us 4 or 5 games this season to sort of gel as a group. And I think the run of wins that we had before and after Christmas of 6 games probably showed what we're capable of as a group. So I think for us, there were lots of positives to take away from this season on reflection. Again, looking ahead to next season, which we like to do, there's not going to be a massive change to our playing squad or coaching group. This season we probably brought in 6 or 7 players to add value to our group. We look ahead to next season. We're not losing any players from this squad, and traditionally the teams in National 1 that do well are the teams that have that cohesion from season to season. We spoke there about Shanners at Blackheath. They're a prime example of not making too many changes every year. So that's something we're looking forward to next season. I think the whole landscape of National League rugby is going to change as a result of COVID-19. Amounts of pressure on rugby clubs that are paying lots of money for players. I don't think that'll be the case next season. Hopefully what you'll find is that teams at our league and potentially teams in the Championship, the ones that will flourish next season are the ones that have that really strong base where players play because they enjoy the atmosphere at the club and they enjoy each other's company. So I think ourselves, Bishop Stortford, are probably another really good example of that, where hopefully clubs like that will do really well next season.
So really, you think that the playing field, albeit financially and possibly at a rugby level, will kind of even out come August, September this year, and come next season, you could be right at the top end of the league, where you want to be ultimately.
Yeah, again, it's hard to predict, isn't it, what's going to happen, but I know from conversations with other National One coaches that some clubs are in a little bit of difficulty financially next season because of the salaries that they pay their players and coaches. We at Cambridge are an ambitious club, but we're realistic at the same hand. We know what our budget is. We manage to operate under that sort of budget that we set ourselves, and we operate within our means. So I know some of the other clubs like Old Eltamians, it's been well documented that their money is not what it was 2 seasons ago. I think Chin are going to be struggling next season. So yeah, I think it does give us a really good opportunity, and it gives, as you said, National One probably more of a level playing field next season.
I think it's worth pointing out at this point that players at the club, as far as I'm aware, aren't salaried apart from a retainer that some of them receive by the club, and are just paid on a game-by-game basis, which is fantastic for the club financially, because if, for example, we're not bringing in any money, we don't then have to pay any money out to the players, which sets us in good stead. And a really good word has to be said from yourself, Tracy Baxter, the entire committee as well, on how that's been set out. Yeah,
and I think that's probably come as a direct result of a number of years ago. Again, the club were in a little bit of financial difficulty. So again, hand on heart, I know that the club now are pretty forward thinking. We operate within our means, and we're never going to pay players some of the salaries that other National One clubs do. And again, we're finding certainly this season that players want to come to us because of the type of rugby that we're playing, because of the environment, because of the level of coaching that they receive at the club. So again, I compare that to 12 months ago, where it was really difficult to sign players because of our league position. So it's I think there's an evolution going on at the moment with what we're trying to do, where we're not where we want to be yet, but I think the signs are really positive, taking into account all the things that have gone on this season.
So this season was a number of changes into the playing squad. As you said, a number of players have come in during the season. Other players have gone during the season. One player in particular, who stayed on and actually had his first season as full-time skipper this year was George Braytag Norris. It was a big task for him, I think, especially considering that both captains from last season, Ian Griffiths and Mike Ayrton, were no longer available to the club and no longer at the club. If you can, how do you feel George has adapted to that role, and how do you feel he can take it forward in the future?
Yeah, no, good question. I think we were probably a thought that we wanted George to be captain this season, and this process started the back end of the season, where we had to win that last game, and I think George was one of the players and one of the characters that probably put his head above the water during that difficult season. And again, that showed that he's got that strength of character, he's got that resolve, and more importantly, he's got that respect off the wider group. So yeah, I think George has flourished in that role this season, and you look at his performances, he's been one of our most consistent performers this season, whether he's played in the second row or whether he's played in the back row, which you've asked him to do a lot this season. But I think George's job has been made a lot easier with the support that he's got from the wider group. Something that we trialled this season was running a leadership group. So there were 7 players on that group, George being one of them, Ben Penfold, Louis Rawlins, Mike Mayhew. So there was a real wide demographic in that group. What we found was, those players drove a lot of the standards that we wanted as a group. They drove the behaviours that we'd spoke about in the off season, and I think we were really good at trying to engage the wider group, the players that weren't involved on that. So I'd like to think that during this season, the leadership from within the group has improved, and again, moving forward, that's going to be something really important for next season and in future seasons, that we've got that core of players that all understand the vision and the vehicle, how we want to get to that vision, I guess.
You mentioned a player in there, Ben Penfold, been at the club a long time now, over 2 spells. I think people will struggle to realise that he's a lot older than he was when he first joined the club, as just coming out of Colts rugby when he was here in his first period. He's gone away, he's gained valuable experience, he's come back into the group, and now I believe is in his second season since he's come back, I think, at the end of the second season or end of the third season since he's come back. I really think, whether you agree or not, I'm not sure, but this season in particular, his off the field work as well as his on the field work at the club has really seen him come of age.
Yeah, I completely agree. And again, you just mentioned the fact that the off the field stuff Ben does as well. So again, if we talk about that first, Ben's role at the club, he's working as the head of the community at the moment, and he's heavily involved in a lot of the coaching with the Vipers Academy that we set up this season. He does a lot of work with the minis and juniors. He's almost the face of the rugby club in the community. So yeah, again, we've got nothing but praise for Ben and the work that he does there. Again, if we look at him and his performances on the field, I think he's grown in maturity as the season's gone on. He's probably in the past, and I spoke with him yesterday. He probably hold his hand up and say that he can be quite a volatile character on the field. Sometimes when things don't go well, he cares a lot about the rugby club. He cares a lot about winning. He's very passionate about that. But I think what we've seen in abundance this season is his ability to control his emotions. I think he understands what effect that has on the on the wider group. So yeah, he's developed really well this season. He's played the majority of games at 10 this season, and I think he's really driving the standards with how we want to play. But I think alongside that, someone like Lawrence Rayner, who's in his second season at the club, I think again, conversations I've had with him over the last couple of weeks, he says probably the most enjoyable season he's had of playing rugby for a long time. And we found that characters like Lawrence, Kieran Duffin, another player who's in his second season at the club, I think they've really flourished this season because they've embedded themselves in the club. The other players understand them. They know what their strengths are. They've engaged off the field. So I think there's been a number of success stories this season with players, whether like Ben Penfold, who's in their fourth or fifth season, or someone like Lawrence, or even someone like Matt Dawson, who's in his first season at the club. I think there's been a whole range of players that have really grown into that role within the first team.
Absolutely. You talk about Matt Dawson. How delighted are you to have him signed on for next campaign? From my perspective, at least, he's been really abrasive coming from number 6 a lot of the time, and has been a really difficult ball carrier to stop as well for the opposition. So he's a sort of player, a bit like Steve Hipwell in the past, has dragged two or three players in to get him down and around the ball, and then it's opened up gaps. So I think it's a really big positive. Yeah,
he's complemented how we want to play both sides of the ball. You look at how he attacks and how difficult he is to stop as a ball carrier because of that low centre of gravity. But then flip that on his head, and you look at some of his defensive work, the number of turnovers that he makes, the number of destructive tackles that he makes. So he's been pretty integral to how we want to play this season. So obviously we're really happy that Matt has agreed to stay with us for another season. I think as well it's always nice when a new player comes in and they fit straight into the environment. And again, you just have to talk to the other players at the club, and they'll probably all say that Matt Dawson, no one's got a bad word to say about him. He just gets on with things. He trains. He's there every week. He's played a lot of rugby for us this season, and probably for us that game against Sale, where he had to play in the second row, position that he's never played before, and without fuss he stepped into that role, and I think he ended up getting man of the match that game. So it just says a lot about that character, and what we find is that the more of these characters that we're able to integrate into the first team at the club, the more infectious that becomes to the other players.
Another player who signed on, I suppose re-signed on in a way, was Finn Crichton. Coventry, obviously, I don't know what the situation was with him in Coventry, but how delighted are you to have a player who's come through at the club, bleeds blood and sand in many ways, coming back to the club and playing his rugby again?
Yeah, over the moon with Finn. I think he wanted to give Coventry a go this season, and he went with our blessing under the premise that if he was going to be loaned out to a National 1 club, then obviously he'd come back to Cambridge. So that was a probably an agreement, an unwritten agreement that we had with Roland at Coventry, and we ended up having Finn for the majority of this season. And I think he's learned a hell of a lot from being in a full-time environment like Coventry. I think he'll talk about what he's learned from the likes of Pete White and Tom Kessel, but probably learning a lot from Nick Walsh when he was at Coventry at head coach, with being a scrum half himself, and a lot of the work that he's done with the England under-20s. So I think we're getting a far better player than probably what we had 12 months ago. I think Finn is now set in his mind that he wants to play a good level of rugby, but he wants to look at his opportunities outside of rugby, and he wants to get a full-time job. And again, we'll support him through that process. But yeah, we're really pleased to have Finn and Kieran Duffin, who's re-signed as well, on board, and all being well, Rodri Adamson will be signing over the next couple of weeks as well. So 3 really good quality scrum halves that have all contributed massively this season in their own ways.
Finn and Rodri, of course, as well as having Kieran there. Kieran is more kind of a 9 straight away. Can't really... I suppose he could if he had to. He could adapt if he had to and play in other positions. But Finn and Rodri in particular can both fill in at fullback if they need to. Rodri's played on the wing as well. So yeah, it's really important that you have players who are very versatile and can play multiple positions across the field and play those positions fairly well as well. Yeah,
I think the way rugby's going, and the direction that rugby's going in, we're trying to stay ahead of the curve, how we think rugby's going to look in the future. And I think the more players that you've got with that element of versatility that can play in different positions, the harder you're going to be to play against. And Rodri, as you've just said, has played scrum half, fullback and winger for us this season. Kieran Duffin has ended up playing 20 minutes on the wing against Darlington. Finn is comfortable at fly half, or equally at fullback as well. So it's a real luxury to have. And again, all of those 3 characters fit in really well to what we're trying to do at the club. Rodri's in his first season. He's probably one of our few players that travels out from London every week. So again, he's at the club. It's just difficult for him to get to the club every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. But I think the longer the season's gone on, he's grown into the club, and he's built and developed those relationships with the other players.
Another player who didn't need to sign on for for next season, had signed a 2-year contract last season, was another second row in Rob Conquest. I've spoken to Rob a number of times this season, and at times he can get frustrated with either selection or how games have panned out for himself and on an individual basis. But I think the core skills that he has, and equally the leadership skills that he can possess on the pitch as well, will be really important for the side going ahead next season. Yeah,
I think not too dissimilar to Ben Penfold. I think Rob is another character that's matured this season on and off the field. He's again actively involved in the coaching outside of the first team. He's taken the lead on the coach this season. He also helps with the Vipers as well as their forwards coach, and that's probably helped him understand the coaching process and selection to some extent. There's been games where, Rob's not been involved this season where, again, we've been completely honest as a coaching team. We've spoke around why we've selected a certain team, and again, he's understood that, and he understands, where he fits into the bigger picture. He's a quality player. He's someone that we've got at the club who's played over 100 appearances for us, and he's really involved in the shaping of our line out. What's working for us. Doing a bit of analysis on the opposition. So yeah, he's another good one to have around, and you just throw in him, George, and Gareth Baxter, who's another player that's come through the minis and juniors at the club, who had his 100th appearance this season. Those are players that we want to invest a lot of our time into. To try and get more success stories like that. And, we've set ourselves a pretty ambitious target that we want up to 40% of our first team squad to come through the minis and juniors in 3 years' time. So I think that probably shows the whole club approach that, we're going to start to invest a lot of time in moving forwards, because there's a massive opportunity, as we spoke about at the start of this interview, around the landscape of rugby changing. And I think the more investment that you put in your younger players at the club, the more attractive you make your first team brand. I think the easier that process is to integrate some of the younger players.
Absolutely. I think that ambition in terms of the time frame that you've given yourself as well is realistic as well, just in terms of getting Colts up to speed of the level, the intensity that you need to be playing at to reach even the outer echelons of that first team squad, the second team, and equally the third team as well, who have played very well this season, under the direction of now Darren Messenger as well. Talk about the team around the team a little bit. I don't know whether you want to comment on any alterations or anything along those lines, but you've got a really good team around you at the moment, and how happy are you as the head coach with the team around you?
Yeah, massively. I think the first thing to mention is, unfortunately, Simon Leader is moving on to pastures new in September. He's been offered a really good position up at Wisbeach Grammar School, so Simon will be taking over as the head of rugby there. So it's it's something that he's had experience of doing before, and I think for a career development, I think it's a really good move for him. He's been brilliant for us as a club. For me, in my 2 years at the club, he's been the go-to coach, I guess, to bounce ideas off. He does a lot of stuff behind the scenes that people wouldn't see. So again, he'll be sorely missed from a coaching perspective, but also the relationship he forged with all the players. They'll go on record, I'm sure, to say how much of an asset Simon was. But again, I know that when he's not got his school commitments, he'll be back down the club on a Saturday to watch the game. So yeah, that's disappointing. We've lost him, but the wider coaching and management group will be very settled next season. What we're looking to try and do is Dan Richmond and myself will carry on with the first team coaching. Below that, we've got a team of coaches that are going to look after the second team and third team. We want a bit more cohesion between all three teams next season. That's something that probably didn't function as we anticipated last season. And then in addition to that, we've got Tracy Baxter and Ian Whitby that'll be first team manager and second team manager respectively. Our medical department, which will be run by Paul Carter, and then the strength and conditioning department, which Ben Fitches will head up. What we look to do next season is Louis Rawlings, who's unfortunately had to retire from rugby because of a number of injuries that he's sustained over the last sort of 18 months, is going to move into probably more of a coaching capacity. His background is strength and conditioning and rehabilitation. So Louis is going to be that go-between the strength and conditioning department and the medical department, and Louis will be with the first team hopefully every Saturday to help the players in their preparation. So again, I think that probably shows a little bit of the direction that we want to go in as a club. The more players that we can have making that transition from playing into coaching or support staff, I think the better that environment's going to be. So really happy with the squad of players that we've got, but also the coaching and management group as well. And again, what I'm really hopeful of and pretty optimistic of is that there'll be that cohesion going into pre-season, when we eventually do start back.
I think a massive congratulations must go from, firstly, myself and no doubt all of the supporters to Simon Leader on his appointment. I think everybody will agree with me in the fact that Simon has been an integral part of how the club has developed off the field in the past kind of 24, 36 months or so. Head of the foundation, setting that up, and then head of the academy as well, the Vipers, which will no doubt be overseen now by yourself and Ben Penfold, and splitting those kind of roles across, which is fantastic. Equally with Louis Rawlings, a big shame to see Louis having to hang up his boots. A really slight build, big character, and always put his head in where it hurt, and always managed to get broken because of it as well, unfortunately. So I think he'll be a massive asset to you, not just from a coaching perspective next season, but also from a social perspective with the players. Obviously for him it'll be just him hanging out with his mates and helping his mates every weekend. So I think that's a really big thing for him, to not drift away from rugby and to keep himself involved. I think a major thing that we don't focus on enough in sport is mental health, and that could have been a big factor if he'd just walked away and not had any integration. But the fact that he's staying involved is fantastic, and the rest of the team around the team sounds to be in tip-top shape as well.
Yeah, I think with going back to Louis, I think he's been, again, just basing this on my short time at the club, he's been one of those players that you can always rely on, to give it 100%, to work really hard off the ball. And, you see some of the collisions that he puts himself in. And as you said, his sort of slight frame is probably not too surprising that he has to finish his rugby playing career quite early. But a conversation that him and I had probably back in January before he made the decision. It was obviously very difficult for him to move away from rugby. He's been playing for a long time. He's had a huge involvement in everything Cambridge. So again, I made the suggestion to, would you still like to be involved next season? And through a number of conversations that we had, we've decided to get him on board in that capacity that we just discussed. So yeah, I think it'll be strange for him to start with not going out onto that pitch, playing on a Saturday. But I think it's almost the second best thing is he's still going to be there. He's still going to have that Saturday atmosphere that that we all love, on match day, and I think he's going to be a real asset to the direction that we're going in.
Absolutely. If we move into kind of the results element of the season, as you say, finished 10th in the end on a points per game basis, which wouldn't have been really the ideal finish to the season. I think maybe from your perspective, you'd have liked to maybe have another crack at it during May and June, if it had been possible. I don't think it's necessarily going to be possible now due to the way that COVID-19 has, let's say, spread itself amongst the United Kingdom and various other places around the world. But your results in general, pretty good. More wins than losses, as far as I can recall, and also double over your local rivals, Bishop Stortford. So you can't really complain in that respect. Hello, we're back in.
Sorry, no, I just missed that. Yeah,
that's
back
right.
in.
So results themselves, more wins than losses, and the double over Bishop Stortford, which you can't really complain about either.
Yeah, I think as well, just to put things into context, because again, it's really easy, in sport just to look at the wins and losses column. But I think for us, it was clear that we had a few objectives that we wanted to achieve last season. We spoke a lot in the off season and the back end of last season around being more of an attacking team and being able to score more tries. And I think through a variety of things, through probably some different attacking systems that we put in place, through a combination of selection and players that we brought in, I thought we became a far more complete attacking team last season. So we scored a number of try bonus points last year, a lot higher than what we did 2 seasons ago. So that was number one objective, and we knew that what would happen as a result of that was if we'd score another 5 or 6 bonus points throughout the season, inevitably we'd win games because our defence has been really good. So that happened. I think the second thing of note was improving our home performances and our results at home. And again, we've not lost at home since the beginning of December, where we lost to Richmond. So again, that's something that we're pretty proud of as a group. And again, that's something that we want to continue with next season. You look at the difference in the crowds to the start of the season to at the end of the season. They grew massively because I think the level of performances that we were showing at home. So again, for us, it's a bit of a no-brainer that home form is going to be really important to generate a wider atmosphere at the club. But again, looking at our wins, we have won a lot more games this season than what we did in previous years. We've had the highest points total that we've had since we've been back in National 1. And again, I'd like to think that out of those 5 games that we had left, I think we could have gone on to win at least 3 of those 5 games, looking at the opposition that we were playing. So yeah, our results had improved, our points scored has improved, but there's still areas of our game that we're going to focus on next season that we need to be better at. I think we scored a lot of tries off turnovers this season, and in that transition from defence to attack, our set piece improved as the season went on. And as you just alluded to there, it's nice to get 2 wins against Bishop Stortford, and that away game at the start of the season was probably some of the best rugby that we've produced for a long time. So loads of good things there to hang our hats on. And then you throw in the Cinderford performance away from home after Christmas into the mix, and look how well that we defended there. So there's lots of good ingredients that we need to bring again next season, and hopefully do that on a more consistent basis.
Absolutely. I don't know whether I don't know how much we've got left to cover. If you don't mind, I wanted to kind of do a little awards, your personal awards kind of thing. Who for you, obviously it's difficult to pick one player, but who for you has stood out the most this season?
I think I'll mention a number of players, and I can explain why these jump to mind. I think we spoke about the leaders of the team, so your George, your Ben Penfold. I think that they've had really good, consistent seasons. Then you sort of cast your net a bit wider, and the likes of Gareth Baxter, I think, has been consistent this season in every performance. For me, someone like Sam Copeland has come of age. He's had 3 appearances now in the first team. Another player that's come through, the Minion Juniors at the club, so a special mention to him. But then you've got the superstars, I guess, like the Matt Hemmers that have scored a number of tries this season. I think he was on 18. I'm sure he'll correct me, but yeah, he scored a lot of tries, and he's played every game this season, which we've not had that luxury before. So it shows what a threat he is when he gets ball in space. So I think Hemmers had a good season, and someone else that we've not spoke about a lot is Joe Tarrant. Joe has come in and he's made that transition from fly half to fullback, which not many people would have done before and tried. And massive credit to Joe. He's grown into that 15 shirt as the season goes on. He's played every minute of every game, other than the 3 or 4 yellow cards that he's had. So again, there's a number of players there that have stood out for me and been really consistent with their performances this season.
Was there a particular moment that stood out for you during the season as well?
I think 2 moments, and this is something that I asked the players last week. Again, we were trying to keep connected remotely and keep everyone engaged, and that was one of the questions. That was one of the questions that we sort of we put to the players. What was your moment of the season? Not necessarily the best result of the season, but are there any moments from any games that you think were the catalyst to push on? And I think the key ones were that last 10 minutes down at Cinderford after Christmas, where we were down to probably 12 players. We're defending on our try line, and again, I don't know how we managed to keep them out from scoring, but that certainly was one of the big moments last season. I think Birmingham Moseley away was probably what kick-started our season, and that's some of the most controlled rugby that I've seen a Cambridge team produce for a long time. We scored, I think it was 40 points or 45 points away from home, and prior to that, Moseley had won 6 games. They'd been unbeaten at home, so that we set a real marker down for National 1 that day. But probably other moments where, again, not many people would realise, but there was a game, might have been against Darlington, where we left Ben Penfold's kicking tea in the changing rooms, and he ended up sort of missing all his kicks that afternoon. But for me, how well that we managed to deal with that, and how well Ben managed to deal with that. Again, we spoke earlier, didn't we, about how volatile sometimes Ben could have been as a character, but under the most sort of trying circumstances there, he really sort of held his hand up and showed those leadership qualities that we've spoke about. So those are probably 3 moments. I think there were a number of good team performances that we can add to that, but I think that Cinderford away game for me probably highlighted all the good things that that we want to be sort of seen or perceived at from the outside.
A number of teams will join National 1 next season. In particular, I want to talk about the team that's coming down from the Championship in Yorkshire Carnegie. It's kind of difficult to say whether they'll have the financial resources to want to go straight back up, or even can try and go straight back up. But how much are you looking forward to going to Headingley ultimately and playing a game there?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So Phil Davis, who's the director of rugby at Leeds, is a mentor of mine, and again, I speak with him on a sort of weekly basis. So I probably know a little bit around how Leeds are going to be approaching next season. They've got a really good 5-year plan in place to be the leading team in Yorkshire. I think it's going to take them more than one season to get out to National 1 next season. They're not going to have a massive playing budget, but I think they're going to rely on the university links that they've got in Leeds with Leeds Beckett and the University of Leeds to have them support in their programme. I don't know whether they'll be playing at Headingley next season, whether they'll have to relocate to play at one of the university's grounds. But again, it's going to be nice to be playing someone different, from dropping down even from the Championship. And then you've got Caldy, which are a fantastic rugby club. We missed them last season. That's one of the more picturesque places to go to, overlooking the Wirral. So that'll be a really tough trip. They didn't lose a game this season, so they'll be coming into
National One off the back of, I think they won 25 games after 25, so they're going to be a really hard team to beat next season because of that habit that they've created this season. And then from National 2, South Taunton, it'll be a little bit of an unknown. I think they've been building the last couple of seasons under Tony Yap, that was heavily involved with Exeter Chiefs back in the day as a player. I think what they've got there is a really good infrastructure, a really good club environment where, again, they're promoting a lot of their younger players coming through the academy system there. And they'll rely heavily on that Exeter Chiefs partnership as well. So I think that'll be a really good away trip to have next season, but also another tough game. And then on top of that, Tunbridge Juddians have come up from Kent. I think they'll be very similar to what Old Eltamians were a few seasons ago, in the fact that they'll attract a lot of players. They're a very well backed club financially, so it wouldn't surprise me if a number of the Old Eltamians players that have moved on will end up at Tunbridge Juddians next season. So those four teams there will be good additions to the league. And then you've got your Blackheaths, your Bishop Stortfords. I think Roslyn Park will be the favourites to get promoted next season. Rams had a fantastic season, so I think it's going to be even harder next season. But again, you take this time to reflect on the season gone by and probably what a good league National One is. You have conversations with Premiership coaches, Championship coaches, and they probably admire that. Probably still that amateur ethos that's involved with National One, that real sort of club feel, which is sometimes missing from the leagues above. So it's going to be exciting. I think everybody now just wants to know when we're able to start back, when pre-season will begin again, and then I think it'll become a little bit more real for everybody.
Absolutely. Just quickly to talk about the squad itself, talked about wanting having the majority of the squad there that's been left, obviously from the end of last campaign, will be there come pre-season. Have you pinpointed anybody in particular to come in or anything along those lines? Obviously, if talks are ongoing, keep stum, but anything that you can give supporters and members alike a word on at the moment?
Yeah, we've already signed 2 new players, 2 backs that we signed back in probably February time, the end of February. But again, with everything that's going on, I think we just want to be sensitive to making any big announcements for next season. So there's 2 players that we have signed, and in addition to that, we've got 2 other players that we're very close to signing for next season, two forwards. So that'll be it for our recruitment next season. I don't think we need to make massive changes. I think we looked at some of the trends in National One last season and some areas for us that we need to strengthen with our squad, and I think that's what's led our recruitment this season. It's been a lot easier with the league position that we've been at. I think players now want to come to Cambridge and play rather than us actively looking for players and speaking to agents. So we're not going to change things massively next season. We've got the nucleus of a really competitive squad in National One, but we hope with the 4 players that we'll be signing and announcing that they're going to give us fresh impetus in those positions and allow us to push on for hopefully a top 5 or top 6 finish next season.
You talk about players wanting to come to you. That's a really good position for the club to be in. Equally, you haven't just got the first team, you've got the second team as well, and equally the social playing sides at the club. And you, as the head coach / director of rugby at the club, can kind of, I suppose, reinforce the message that Cambridge is here as a club. It's a community club, and whatever your ability, whatever your background, as long as you're a fan or a lover of the egg-shaped ball, then you can come down and try and force your way into one of the social sides, or equally put your hand up for a first team squad place as well.
Yeah, that's going to be a massive driver next season, that whole club engagement. And again, speaking from experience last season, we emphasised, put a lot of focus on the first team, probably to the detriment of a lot of other things. So moving forward, this now is a really good opportunity, with us being away from rugby, to engage with the wider club. The senior players have been fantastic, engaging with mini and junior coaches and players. The second and third team will have a slightly different feel to it next season. So what we're hopeful of is to go back to having that one club ethos, which we're really renowned for. So we'll be investing, and I'll be investing a lot of time and effort, not just in the first team and making sure that we keep developing there, but from a wider club perspective, to make sure that pathway that playing pathway from the under sevens all the way through to the first team is prevalent, but also there's probably better coach development, because again, the coaches are the ones that are there every Sunday morning with the minis and juniors. The coaches are going to be there to develop the players. So for us, if we look after those two assets that we've got at the club, we hope that in 18 months' time we'll be in a really strong position and one of the sort of drivers in National One for creating sort of forward-thinking environments.
Absolutely, Richie. Thank you very much for speaking with me. Just a quick last note. Just have you got a message for the supporters, the members of the club at what is a difficult time for everybody?
Yeah, probably just a massive thank you to the continued support that we're receiving from everybody, and I'm eternally grateful. I know the players as well are making more of an effort now to engage with the wider community at Cambridge. But I think from my perspective, just make sure that you're staying safe, you're adhering to the government rules that are out there, and I think the sooner that we pull through this, the sooner that we can look ahead with excitement for next season. So yeah, stay safe, and we look forward to seeing everybody back when normality hits us, I guess.
Richie, thank you very much, and we'll speak again soon.
Cheers, Niall. Take care.
Cheers. Thank you.
Cheers. Bye, mate.